Well, on Fanalysis, we combine the analytics used in fantasy football with the metrics of sports betting to find out where the smart money is leading. And for that, we bring in a man you can find on Twitter as Old Man Who Bets, Geoff Sheasby. No blonde hair, because Patrick Mahomes did not throw 4 interceptions, so that was definitely a victory. Oh, wait, there's definitely no blonde hair under there, right?
Definitely no blonde hair. It's a bad hair day. Figured I'd throw the hat on.
Okay, well, let's start with the NFC Championship game. Tampa's getting 3 in Green Bay. Bucks blow out the Packers this season, earlier this season, way back in Week 6. How much can be gleaned from that game?
You know, Steve, that's a great question. Does history repeat itself? I don't know. I think first off, let's zoom out for a second and just make a comment on how lucky we are to see Tom Brady going against Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau. I hope it snows. This is going to be, a legendary matchup. But moving forward to that game, right, what did we see? We saw one of the best offenses in the league versus one of the best defenses in the league in terms of overall efficiency stat. And obviously, the defense of the Bucks won that matchup. Aaron Rodgers threw for 160 yards and 2 scores. Aaron Jones had 10 carries for 15 yards. Davante Adams 6 for 61. The auxiliary running backs on Green Bay did actually do pretty well. Jamal Adams 4 for 34. A.J. Dillon 5 for 31. He has been seeing more snaps in the last week or so. But that's not what I'm really caring about here. I think at the end of the day, the Bucks sold out to stop the run. They've got one of the best run Ds, actually the best run D in terms of overall defensive efficiency in the league, and decided, we'll let Aaron Rodgers beat us through the air. We'll let Davante Adams beat us. And that's a bold strategy. But this defense has looked elite. When we're looking at offense and defense's DVOA here, efficiency, we're seeing the Packers 5th in the rush on offense, 1st in the pass on offense. The Bucks on the other side, number 1 against the D, and number 5 against the pass. So those are very, very even stats for this matchup. We're again talking about, the unstoppable force versus the immovable train, like we did last week with the Packers versus the Rams. And of course, the Packers did prevail there in a pretty easy cover. We're on that this week. I don't know. I'm leaning towards the Bucks. Well, do I think it's going to be a blowout like it was last in Week 6? Absolutely not. But I do love the Bucks. I've got it at 3.5. I think it's hovering around 3 right now, at least at the early look.
Okay, here's the thing, Geoff. The reason why we keep coming back to Week 6, even though it was so long ago, is because that was the actual matchup between the two teams. And in that game, the Buccaneers sacked Aaron Rodgers 3 times against the blitz. Rodgers hasn't been sacked against the blitz since that game. So is this a case of the Bucks just have found a formula to get to Rodgers, or is it a case where Rodgers and the Packers have kind of figured out what their weakness is on the O-line and they've shored it up?
Yeah, Steve, this first game is so interesting, right? I think it's one that both these teams were trying to find their identity early season. The Packers were super hot while the Bucks were not. The Bucks were getting all the flack in the world, and they finally came out and played a good game. These are 2 very different teams today. I think when we look at that first matchup, something I look at and I think is going to be the X factor here is more or less the Packers defense not being able to hold Tampa Bay down. In the first game, we saw the Bucks exploit the 18th ranked rush defense in terms of overall efficiency of the Packers, where Ronald Jones ran 23 for 113 and 2 touchdowns. Even Kevin Vaughn came in and ran 5 for 42. Now we've got Leonard Fournette in the mix, who's also running very well. Those are stats that I think are pretty concerning. When we look at the overall efficiency of these teams, the Packers are 4th, the Bucks are 3, like the Bucks obviously there. When we're looking at, we already looked at the Packers O and the Bucks D in terms of overall efficiency, 1-5. 5-1 was what that was, very even across the board. When we look at the Bucks offense versus the Packers defense, we're seeing the Bucks offense with a sizable advantage. They're number 10 in terms of rush efficiency on offense, number 5 in terms of pass efficiency on offense. The Packers D is 18th and 15th. So what we saw in the first game here was, the Bucks running wild. I think that could happen again, but when it comes down to it, I just think that overall, the Bucks, no one runs on the Bucks. So if Aaron Jones can get it going, I'd be very surprised. It feels like the Bucks have more ways to win this game. The stats are very similar across the board. When we're looking for yards per play, Packers offense 6.3, Bucks offense 6.0, Packers defense 5.5 yards per play. Bucks defense 5.1 yards per play. So those are all within, a standard deviation, a rounding error away of each other. But not so when I see an even matchup like that, I'm taking the points. One other stat I think is super interesting in terms of teamrankings.com overall strength of schedule. The Green Bay Packers 18, the Tampa Bay Bucks 1. So,
wow.
I think we talk about kind of the narrative all season. We touched on this last week as well of Tom Brady being washed up, yada, yada, yada. this is an offense that's finally finding their groove. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, even Scotty Miller is coming to play. Both Cameron Brate and Rob Gronkowski. I think that's why, week 6, that was the first time this offense really popped off. They've been popping off recently all the time against defenses that are ranked in a similar spot as Green Bay. So I think they are now a well-oiled machine. Bruce Arians is bringing some passion here. Tom Brady is throwing a great deep ball. I've got a hard time betting against the GOAT versus, one of the other GOATs, but I've got a hard time betting against Tom Brady in this game. Love the Bucs at 3.5.
That's a really good point, because I can't believe Tom Brady threw for more than 4,600 yards this year and 40 touchdowns, but over his last 6 games, he's averaging 318 yards per game, and he has the most 20-plus passes in the NFL. That has to come into play, especially that recency bias that we've started to appreciate more.
Yeah, 100%, Steve. And I think that's a really good point, right? Early season, they seemed to be all ground or all air. There was no real balance on offense. They're finding that balance here. I think that's, again, going to be the X factor. I just feel like they have more ways to win. Again, this Packers D, 18th against the rush, 15th against the pass. The Bucs offense is above average in both of those categories. So in terms of kind of adjusting here, I feel like the Bucs have the edge. Whereas if we stop, it's a bold call to sell out to stop the run like they did the first time. But they were able to do it. And this Bucs defense, granted, Drew Brees is not what he once was, or at least didn't look like what he once was in these last couple of weeks. But, they held Michael Thomas to 0 catches with 0 yards. So do I expect that from Devontae Adams? No. Is he probably the best red zone target in the league? Absolutely. Will the Packers score points? I think they will. But at the end of the day, even stats, better strength of schedule, probably a lean defensively for sure for the Bucs. Again, I'm taking the points all day, even in Lambeau.
The AFC Championship has the Bills getting a field goal in Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes looks like he's going to clear concussion protocol here, but has his status shifted the public money to Buffalo? And if so, is the public playing it right?
Yeah, it seems most sources are still saying undecided. Mahomes did practice on Wednesday, so all signs are him pointing to playing. The line is sitting at 3. It opened at 2.5. There hasn't been much movement there. Public, I believe, is currently, at least according to sportsinsights.com, at 55% on the Bills, 45% on the Chiefs. Not sure how many books they cover, they pull from. Public, private, or public versus sharp, not something I really rely on unless it's like 70% plus, an overwhelming majority here. But you got to think if Mahomes is announced as healthy, that this line is going to move back in terms of the Chiefs' favor. I've currently locked a half unit on the Bills at 3, hoping that it'll get to 3.5, maybe even 4, push over that key number. But at the end of the day here, I like the Bills through and through. With Mahomes, I like the Bills. Without Mahomes, I absolutely love the Bills, even though that line will probably move in the wrong spot. But wanted to get ahead of any sort of movement. I was comfortable at 3 regardless of kind of the status of Patrick Mahomes.
Well, here's the thing. That Chiefs team hasn't actually beat the spread since they beat a 19.5-point spread against the Jets. Does that mean that that's a trend that we need to pay attention to, or is it one that could very likely flip, especially since now we're talking about just 3? It's a really short.
Yeah. Hard to say, right? Would they have covered last week? They were up 19-3 before the injury. They were obviously on their way to do so. We went 3-1. The only game that we didn't win last week was the Chiefs. But, there's 2 angles to that, right? Is it a trend? They just can't cover games. Yes, they've been giving up a lot of last possession touchdowns to not cover. But at the end of the day, Vegas generally tries to make teams go 500, so they profit either way. So if there's ever a team due to cover, once again, it is the Kansas City Chiefs. But I like to throw out a lot of that noise. We're looking at the Brax task here. Overall, we're looking at weighted DVOA. That is efficiency numbers in the second half of the season. We've got the Chiefs at number 6. We've got the Bills at number 1 in the league. And that's something that I think is really important. This team is firing off on all cylinders. But, we look at week 6, again, also very strange. Both of these teams played each other in week 6. Now both these teams playing each other to get to the Super Bowl. That was a matchup that the Chiefs absolutely dominated. It was the Bills' worst effort of the year. Maybe it was nerves. Josh Allen finally playing one of the best teams in the league. Can he shake it? Who knows? But at 26-17 was the final score. It really didn't tell the story about how dominant the Chiefs are. In terms of overall yards, the Chiefs had 466 to the Bills 206. Time of possession, they had 37 minutes versus 22 minutes. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he went 26 for 161 yards and 2 TDs. So looking at any previous matchup, you're going to be like, okay, this is an easy win for the Chiefs. But let's zoom out for a second, Steve. Let's look at their offense versus defense. Offense for the Bills, 22 in terms of rushing, 3 for the pass. The defense for the Chiefs, 31 against the rush, 16th against the pass. That is no good. Other side of the ball, we see a little bit more close here. The Chiefs offense, 13th for the rush, 2nd for the pass. Bills defense still leaving some to be desired, 17th and 12th. But not as glaring as 31 and 16th. So, I think the first game here didn't necessarily tell the whole story, and something that, with some more data analysis, which we'll get to in just a second, Steve, I'm really excited about.
Well, and that's the thing, too, because it seems like the Chiefs are the #1 offense, clearly the most dangerous. But have the Bills become as dangerous, maybe even more than the Chiefs?
I think at least equi dangerous, if you will. Again, we're looking at overall yards per play, points per play in terms of as well as these efficiency stats. We look at yards per play. We're seeing the Chiefs offense at 6.3, the Bills offense at 6.1, very close. The Chiefs defense 5.6, the Bills defense actually slightly better at 5.5. Points per play, we're actually seeing the Bills offense being better and the Bills defense being better. So let's hold up for a second. The Bills got blown out in the first game, but their offense scores more points per play. Their defense allows less points per play. And we're having a conversation, obviously, because it's the Chiefs at home, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes. But the data for me is pointing to very similar, if not better, for the Bills. There's hardly any fans. I guess the Chiefs do have a better fan scenario than a lot of other stadiums. But nonetheless, I think a lot has changed since this first matchup, Steve. If we look at, once again, Edwards-Helaire, 26 for 161 and 2 touchdowns. Since that game, he hasn't had over 15 carries once. He's gone over 80 yards 0 times in that. I think he hit 79 once. He's averaging 42.6 yards per game. And the Bills' defense has stiffened up a little bit. They've only allowed 200-yard rushers since week 6. And more importantly, one of those was to the Patriots. In the second time that they played the Patriots, they held their top rusher under 70. So they did make some adjustments to slow down that offense. And when we look at these overall, again, weighted DVOA versus the overall season one, trying to, again, get a gauge of where they were at the 16-game sample versus where they are now. This Buffalo defense has gone from number 12 on the season to number 8 currently, where the Chiefs defense has done the opposite. They've gone from 22 to 24. So end of the day, I'm following the numbers here, Steve. Bills are ranked number 1 in DVOA compared to 6 at Kansas City. Both defenses are poor, but Buffalo has been trending at least in the right direction. Bills got trashed in round 1. That's fine by me. We're talking about a new day, any given Sunday. Give me the Bills at +3.
So that's how he sees the matchups. It's going to be Brady versus the Bills in the Super Bowl. Check out our other segment to see if Jared Smith of Sports Grid agrees. Until then, for Geoff Sheasby, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.